Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Inlay Terms. I'm your host, Payman Asghari, and our guest today is fellow PPC candidate, Mr. Curtis R. McManus. Curtis, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Curtis, you are the PPC candidate for Saskatoon West, if I can read correctly.
Yes, sir.
Why don't you start by telling the audience a little about yourself? You can go into as much detail as you want, where you were
Sure.
born, where
Yeah.
you grew up.
Yeah, you bet. I was born here in Saskatchewan on a farm about 2 hours west of Saskatoon out at Kindersley. And I completed my education at the U of S here in Saskatoon. I studied history and political philosophy. I completed a BA honors degree in 2004, and then my master's degree subsequent in 2005. And in between, since then and now, I've spent a number of years overseas teaching English. So spent a lot of years overseas. And yeah, so most grew up here in Saskatchewan, and am quite familiar with the temperament of the province. And I'm happy to be running for the PPC in the upcoming, hopefully soon, federal election.
Do you find the political philosophy, does
Yeah.
that help you at all with what's going on right now?
It provides a little bit of clarity, we'll say. I think when most people look at politics, they look at what's going on in the news cycle, and there's no sort of depth underneath that. So, having studied political philosophy, by that I mean Plato, Aristotle, certainly in the 20th century, Hannah Arendt, who's was inspired by the ancients. Having studied these writers and these thinkers, it provides me with a little bit more depth than I might otherwise have had I not studied political philosophy.
I did an online online philosophy course, and it's like
Yeah.
80% of or I don't know, 50% is on Plato and Aristotle, and then there's this massive void until you get to the Renaissance. Like nothing much
Yeah,
happened.
yeah. There's once you get out of antiquity, there is that void through the Dark Ages and the early Middle Ages until we get to the modern era post 1789. So yeah, there is a huge gap. I mean, there are some guys along the way. Thomas Hobbes shows up in the in the period of the Reformation. But yeah, there is a gap between the ancients and the moderns, definitely. But no, for my money, I tend to favor, and I taught this as well when I was working at the college in Lloydminster. I taught political history, political philosophy, most of which was Greek philosophy. And I find it very fascinating and edifying to read the ancients. There's a great deal of wisdom to be had in those old musty books.
Yeah, it's if only we could apply it to
Yeah, amen to that.
politics
Yeah,
today.
yeah.
Who knows if we get you into Parliament, maybe you can turn things around single-handedly.
I think there have been other far greater and better people who have tried that to reform Parliament. I'm thinking here of the progressive movement, not progressives in the way we understand it, but the progressive movement that arose on the prairies here in the 1920s. They actually did, they were a very idealistic bunch, and they did try to go to Ottawa and try to reform Ottawa. And the party collapsed after 3, 4, or 5 years. But they were a very idealistic bunch, the progressives in the 1920s from Saskatchewan and Alberta. Very idealistic bunch, and they tried to fix what they saw as the problem in Ottawa, but the machine just ground them up and spit them out, and they're a footnote in history now, unfortunately.
I was gonna say good morning to one of my avid fans. Good morning, Prairie. Um, Well, I actually didn't know about the progressives in the
Yeah,
prairies,
yeah.
but let me ask you about that. Like, what do you think this machine is that's making
Mhm.
it so difficult to make change? And I'll give you my answer so that
Sure.
prepare you to answer it.
Yeah, yeah,
A
you
big
bet.
part of it, I think it's the media. It's
Sure.
essentially election interference. Like they're using
Yeah,
taxpayer money to craft the narrative, and they have
yeah,
a monopoly on it. And
yeah,
if you're outside of that, they'll crush you like they did with the PPC in 2019, or they'll just
yeah.
like other you. They'll just pretend like you don't exist.
Sure, yeah, and I think there's a great deal to be said about about media interference. Especially we've all seen and witnessed the deterioration of the CBC and other media outlets over the years. But institutionally, I look at the new Liberal leader, Mark Carney. He's our new prime minister, and he was elected strictly by the members of the party. And institutionally, I just, as a Canadian, as a informed Canadian, I find that objectionable in so many ways, that we have this candidate who sort of stopped by on his way home from Europe and became our prime minister. And I just, institutionally, structurally, that's for me. That's an issue. The fact that one party can determine who our prime minister is, and then keep Parliament suspended after he's elected, and that it just I don't know how you change that. But there's what I call a democratic deficit in this country, and I'm not sure how you go about fixing that. Do we march in the streets? I don't know what we do. The PPC, voting PPC, seems to me a good option within the framework that we have to address these much larger issues that to me are a problem. They're an issue.
I was talking to one of the higher ups in the PPC yesterday,
Yeah,
and we were talking about how the other parties, they look to polling, whereas the PPC actually stands on principle or
yeah,
policy, if you want to call it.
yeah,
My challenge is when I get in front of the voters, I have about 20 seconds to make my pitch, and then I lose them. It's
yeah.
very difficult to get that across in 20 seconds.
Sure.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's there's a lot of yeah, there's a lot of issues at play, right? And yeah, it's tough to boil down the problems into a 20-second soundbite or whatever. But it's tough. It's tough to do that. Yeah, definitely.
So let's
Yeah.
get the easy questions out of the way.
Sure.
Um, I want to get to this looming election.
Yeah.
Have you ever run for public office before?
No, first time. First time.
All right. And why did you decide to go with the PPC?
Mhm. Well, I think it's as you just mentioned. The PPC stands on principle, not ideals, but it stands on principle, as opposed to the Conservative Party. There's a phrase being bandied about these days, and it's not just in Canada, it's happening in the UK as well. But people are talking about the uniparty, that there's not much difference between a conservative party in Canada or in England or in Australia. So there's this uniparty. So you got the conservatives, who are very similar to the globalist progressive liberals, and the PPC is not that. It's a party principle. And I look around at my culture, and I'm a lifelong conservative, and I look around at my culture and I ask the question, what did the Conservative Party conserve? And I can't find very much that they did. So there's an issue there, and the Conservative Party is not, to my way of thinking, it's not a very conservative party. It doesn't embrace conservative philosophy, of the type that you might find in Edmund Burke, for example. But that's a real problem for me, and that's one of the attractions to the PPC. It seems to stand on principle, conservative principles, and that I found that very attractive, as opposed to the Uniparty, where you got the conservatives. It's just all well and good, but the Conservative Party, ask the question, what have they conserved? I can't point to very much that they have.
So, what exactly about? I was going to ask you what policy platforms of the PPC you like the
Mhm.
most, but let me ask it this way: what is it about the PPC that you find attractive as like conservative principles?
Yeah, they're the only party. Maxime Bernier is the only leader, and the PPC is the only party that will openly acknowledge, that will say that we're living in a time of cultural revolution, right? And the PPC is the only conservative party that's willing to say, the revolution is done, it's over, it's finished, we're done. We're not going to go down that path anymore. We're going to fix our immigration system. We're going to fix or get rid of the DEI requirements in hiring. So the PPC is the only party that is, and I call it a revolution. I'm not sure very many other people call what we're living through a cultural revolution, but it is. It is, for all intents and purposes, a revolution, full on a revolution, top to bottom, change, turning things upside down and trying to change and shape society in a way that globalist progressive liberals find more tolerable. So the PPC is the only party that is willing to acknowledge that we're living through a time of massive cultural change. And I mean, the Conservative Party, they won't even address some of these hot button cultural issues. They still frame it as culture wars, right? Importing that idea from the United States. And that's not what it is. We're living through a revolution right now. And the PPC is the only party that is addressing it directly. And I find that attractive and appealing. And that's one of the reasons why I tossed my name into the hat, as it were.
Um, I see what the conservatives are doing. Like they think we should play to the center to
Sure.
try to get 51%
Yep.
support and then get in, and then we can slowly roll back. Like that's their vision. But
Yeah.
I think first of all, Carney identified that. So
Yeah.
he kind of he routed Polyev by going to the right on many of his issues.
Yeah.
And I think it also backfired because his hardcore base is like, dude, grow a spine.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've been on, I'm fairly regular on Twitter, and I've been tagging Polyev in a lot of tweets about, what are you doing about what we're seeing in the cultural landscape. And for me, the politics of opportunism, I can't get behind that. Adopting a policy to get elected and then change things. No, I'm not. And maybe that's the way politics actually works. I don't know, but I'm not an opportunist to take advantage to get elected, and then yeah, no, the politics of opportunism. That's a very liberal party approach again. That's another one of the problems with Canadian politics. Maybe politics generally, I'm not sure, but yeah,
One problem I have with lying to get in and then
yeah,
rolling out your actual policy is that you just end up rolling out the lie. You get caught up in the lie.
yeah. I mean, there's no benefit to not being truthful, right? There's no benefit. Uh, we're all adults here, and we all have values and beliefs and principles that we believe in for one reason or another. And for me, it's the a philosophy of conservatism that I've held deeply for a long, long time. And I'm a good Canadian, and so I'm a good Burkean conservative, and that's sort of my touchstone for modern politics is Edmund Burke and his reflections on the Revolution in France, written in the 18th century. And principles matter. Philosophy matters. And yeah, I mean, I share I share your viewpoint there. Yeah.
Just a quick question: how long have you been a candidate?
Oh gosh, I don't know, maybe a month.
Okay, okay, so relatively
Yeah.
new.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
can you imagine if they call an election on Sunday? It's like they're throwing you in the deep end.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, I have a lot to learn about politics, and but yeah, if it's I would be so grateful and happy and pleased if the election was if the writ was to be dropped on Sunday. I mean, I've been fantasizing about this for I don't know how many years now. I think maybe since 2016, since Trudeau got elected. But yeah, it's time for a change. My goodness, it's time that the Canadian people are allowed the opportunity to vote for their government rather than the party, the Liberal Party, deciding for us. It's long past the point where Canadians should be exercising their democratic right to vote for their own government. And if that comes on Sunday, I'd be thrilled. I'd be thrilled with that.
Well, you're running headstrong right into the firing
Yeah.
squad.
Yeah.
You're a tougher man than me.
Oh dear. Well,
We
we'll
gotta.
see how it goes.
I gotta go to one of the comments. David versus Goliath. It says, "Principles matter." No kidding. Way to go, Curtis, for stepping up.
I appreciate that.
What was I going to say? I did an event. I've been doing this for I don't know a year and a half now, so I'm not I'm not the longest running candidate, and I haven't. This is my first election,
Yeah.
but I'll give you some good news and some bad news. So the bad news, as you already know, is that our opponents they can run under their brand, right? Like the Conservative Party brand is
Sure.
established.
Yeah.
But the good news is a lot of these candidates that are running, they're kind of like lame duck candidates. They're nervous, they're clunky, they don't they're not charismatic. That's
Sure.
that's the downside of depending on your brand. So
Yeah.
use that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I have a lot to learn. I'm aware of that. I have a lot to learn about politics, about media and interviews and that kind of thing. But I'm enough of an idealist to think if I have good ideas and good principles, that isn't in and of itself valuable. There is value there. And I don't know, maybe that's a naive and idealistic way to look at things, but I believe that. I believe that.
Okay, I'm gonna hit you with a hard question. We didn't
Sure.
cover this, but I was on a space yesterday, and there was a host in there. Her name is Sue Kellen Dreyer, I believe.
Okay.
They were interviewing a Conservative Party candidate. And
Yeah.
Sue, she's a little bit older, and she's trying to say that this whole multiculturalism act, it's not
Mhm.
failing because we're bringing in different cultures. It's failing because we're bringing in different religions.
Yeah.
Um, like how important is Christianity to the fabric of Canada? Like, is it something that we've jettisoned, or is it something that we need?
Oh, I mean, oh wow, that's a big question. To me personally, it's very important because I understand that our culture, in addition to its sort of Greco-Roman heritage, has to, tip its hat to Christianity. Now, if the question is Christianity relevant anymore? I mean, we live in an increasingly secular and an increasingly secular culture. So, for my part, the Christian church matters because it's sort of, to use Burke's phrase, it provides us with an anchor, right? A moral anchor, a philosophical anchor. It provides us with an anchor that we can hold on to, right? And that's, that's where I see, that's how I feel about the church, and it's important to me. I don't go every Sunday, but I do attend church here in Saskatoon, and it's important to me, especially when I look at the alternative. The alternative is liberal progressive ideology, and that has exhausted itself. We can talk about it later if you want, but liberal progressive ideology has reached its a tipping point, if you will. It's exhausted itself, and there has to be something else that people can grab onto, and conservatism and Christianity and the church. I mean, that they've been around for thousands of years, and so yeah, it's important to me. No, definitely. Yeah.
Uh, some people in the audience might not know what the word progressive means.
Uh,
Do you want to take a swing at describing it?
well, I use progressives the word progressives as a kind of catch-all for modern liberals, modern sort of hard left liberals of the type of Justin Trudeau, that kind of thing. But progressivism as an ideal is it's not a philosophy as such, but it politically, ideologically, it's connected to the communist movement of the early 20th century, going back to the middle of the 19th century. That's the heritage of the progressive ideology. It belongs over there on the hard left, and that's the way I do a better job of writing than I do talking. So if you're interested, read my books. I do a better job of explaining the heritage of progressivism. It's the hard left. It sits up there on the hard left with your communist ideology and Bolshevism. That it's a cousin to communism, and I think a lot of people miss that. The communists and the progressive, they have renamed themselves multiple times over the years, from the new left to progressives. They've used different names over the years, and progressive is just the most recent name that the hard left has adopted. But the hard left, their heritage, I mean, it's questionable at best. So it's sort of catch-all phrase that I use to describe the hard left, again, of the type of Justin Trudeau, that kind of approach to politics.
In watching the leadership convention, they used a lot of progressive language in that. So Justin Trudeau said, we liberals, we get criticized for not celebrating enough, but
Yeah.
there's so many more victories to be won. I'm like, that's
Yes.
progressivism. Like, it's never over. You always have to
Yes.
progress. There's
Yes.
no there's no destination. You're just
Yep.
going.
Yep. That's it. That's it. And that's a crucial point. That's an important point. I'm trying to pull it up. I have my book here, but yeah, progressivism, by its own internal logic, it must keep progressing toward what, I have no idea. I guess it's that utopian vision that they have, that they can create a better world, which is just around the corner. And that kind of fantasy utopianism, I just find objectionable. But you're right. I remember what you just mentioned there. I remember that. I remember Trudeau saying, "Is progress over? Progress to what? To where? And is it over? But no, yeah, the progressives have to keep progressing, which is why so many lunatic things come from the hard left. They see it as progress, And that notion of that evolutionary notion that progresses sort of graft onto the way they see history, that it's evolved, that we are evolving, that they are the more evolved political species. I mean, they've had that conceit for a long time, since the French Revolution, really. And it's all sort of built on this vague utopian vision that they have, that they can solve history, right? They can fix history. They can redeem humanity, as it were. And that kind of utopianism, I just find objectionable for a number of reasons, really.
I'm going to add two things to that concept of utopia.
Sure.
Uh, Communism, net zero. Here,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's the same thing, right? It's the climate movement is very much rooted in um, anti-West, anti-industrial, anti-capitalist sentiment of the hard left, right? It's all part and parcel of the same ideology, and I think that gets lost on a lot of people. But no, you're right. I agree.
so another comment from the audience, self-governed. Religion is a competent. I think it means a component of culture. You cannot have a nation without a shared culture. I think
Yeah.
he's saying you need religion is a subset of
Sure.
culture, and you need culture.
Yeah. No, I would agree with that. Um, I would take it a bit further than that. Well, I don't want to do that here, but I mean, again, the church again provides that moral anchor rather than ideology telling me how to behave, which is basically what we have today. We have the progressive morality police telling citizens, you cannot say this and this, and you cannot feel or think this way or that way. you know um, if I want a political ideology to tell me that, I'll go find it on my own, thank you. But I think the church provides an anchor, right? A moral anchor, a sort of a frame of reference for right and wrong, right? That we are not able to come up with on our own, or that we haven't come up with a replacement on our own, not a good one, anyways. So there's a number of reasons why the Christian faith matters in today's political climate. But no, a component of culture, definitely, sure, yeah,
So first of all, I'm gonna step out of character. Self-governed. If you
sure,
want to have, if you want to jump on a live stream with me later, send me a DM. I can give you 45 minutes after this.
sure.
Uh, Sorry about that. Regarding
Yeah.
this culture thing, I was born in Iran, and
Ah, okay,
in Iran, uh, at least my circle of my parents' friends, we weren't religious, but we had a sense of community. And when you have a
yeah,
sense of community, you do things on your own. You're more sovereign. You're more
yeah,
individualist. Canada, we in abolishing the church and religion, all of that's been transferred to a central authority we call government. And
yeah.
now you need like a license to fish, and people are wondering
Yes.
how we got here.
Yeah, yeah, no, you're right about that, that sense of community. And again, I might refer back to Edmund Burke here, who wrote in his Reflections on the Revolution in France about the importance of what he called I love the phrase, little platoons, right? Little platoons like the church, like labor organizations, like schools, community organizations, right? And he was outlining back then what makes conservatism valuable to the community, right? Because without these organizations, without this sense of community, we're sort of rudderless and lost, right? And the church, I think, historically has provided that. And but I didn't know where you were from, Iran. That's fast. I worked with fellow from Iran when I taught at the college up in Lloydminster, Alberta. Wonderful guy, fascinating guy to talk to, definitely.
Yeah, there's a lot of us around the world. The
Yeah,
joke goes for like 5,000 years, Iranians never left Iran, and then Islam took over, and everyone just fled.
yeah,
Yeah.
right. I'm sure there's a lot of truth to that too. Yeah.
There's one more question from Ferrari. Where is he? Here we go. Any thoughts on Carney inviting Zelensky to the G7?
Mm. Uh, I guess the answer to that question depends on how I feel about Canada helping to bankroll that war between Russia and Ukraine. And I'm still not definitive on that, so I couldn't give a definitive answer on that. I mean, I have some rough ideas about how I see that conflict and Canada's role in it, but I couldn't say definitively one way or the other.
All right. Um, Man, we've covered so much. It's
Mm,
always hard for me to gauge guests. Sometimes they come on and we talk about absolutely nothing for 45 minutes, and then we get to the tough issues, but we
yeah,
banged out all the tough ones.
yeah.
What about your thoughts on Carney in general? Uh, like Trudeau was tanking, and then they
Mm.
brought Carney in, and I kind of it's like I wasn't wearing glasses all my life, and I realize now how incompetent the politician Trudeau was.
I mean, yeah, I could go on for if you wanted to chew up another hour. I could talk about how I feel about Justin Trudeau. But Carney at least I think has some ability, right? I'm not saying I agree with it. In fact, he's written books that I really should get around to reading because I've heard that his books outline his sort of progressive globalist vision for Canada, and I really need to get around to reading his books. But I think he's a far more capable person than Justin was. Justin was just a train wreck from start to finish, right? From 2016 until he resigned, what, a month ago. He was just an absolute train wreck. But Carney, at least, I think, has some chops. I think he has. I think he has ability, and that's something that Trudeau didn't have. And I don't philosophically agree with Mark Carney, but I think at least he has some ability, if I can say that.
He's a competent communist.
Yeah. Yes, I mean, now that you put it like that, a competent communist. Okay, so I'm rethinking it. Within the context of Canadian politics, I think he's a competent. I don't want to say talented, but he's a competent, efficient um, man that has some ability. I mean, I'm coming from Justin Trudeau. Remember that, who had zero competence in any area that I could see, and so we have Carney now, who has at least he has a resume, and that's something, right? Where so I don't know how much positive I can say about the guy. Again, I have to read his books because I don't know a whole lot about his vision, but I would like to read his books to find out where exactly he would like to take Canada. But if he's a globalist, progressive liberal, I have a general idea of where he would like to go, and philosophically, that's not where I want to go.
Let me ask you, I guess we should leave Carney because we could talk, like you said, for another hour.
Mm,
What about your vision for Canada?
mm,
Mine, the reason I'm running for federal office is because I want to completely, like, well, not completely, but scale down the federal government
Sure.
so that we can get to the actual task that needs to be resolved, which is scaling down these provincial governments, because that's where most of the crap coming out of BC is coming from Victoria, not Ottawa.
Hmm. Yeah.
But I don't know, what's your vision? Like, why are you running? What do you want to see? What kind of Canada do you want to live in?
Yeah, that's a good question. And you know, the Canada that I grew up in is not the same country that I'm living in today. It's changed fundamentally at its core. And I would like a return to some sort of, I don't want to use Poilievre's wording here, but some sort of common sense idea of what Canada is as a nation. I mean, for 10 years now, we've been told that Canada is a post-national state, which is a sort of um, an idea that crops up from the far left, from the hard left, the idea that nationalism no longer matters, ethnicity or citizenship no longer matters. We're living in a time beyond states, right? It's a very, very Marxist inspired idea. So for 10 years, we've been told that we live in a post national state. I personally would like to destroy that idea and get back to some sort of cohesive sense of who we are as a country. Whether that means embracing our the Kanzuk, you've heard of Canada, New Zealand, UK, and Australia. You've heard, whether that means embracing that idea or embracing our relationship with the UK. That's these are discussions that we should have. And but this idea, this liberal progressive idea of post nationalism, I mean, my goodness, I can't believe he got away with that for 10 years. But yeah.
Yeah, it's I'm just going to bring up what self-governance said, that religion is a component of culture. You can't have a nation without a culture. So, you know,
Yeah.
religion is culture, culture is nation. So when Trudeau says that we're a post-nationalist state, probably what he's saying is I just want to get rid of the church and replace it with a state,
Yeah.
communist.
Yeah, yeah, and they've been trying to do that since the French Revolution. Robespierre tried to the Festival of Reason, what he called it back in 1793. But yeah, trying to de-Christianize. Ooh, that word is just ugly, right? Robespierre and the revolutionaries tried to de-Christianize France, and that's what the progressive set has been doing since 1789. They've been trying to secularize and de-Christianize the West. I mean, this is nothing new. This has a long history in the Western tradition. This impulse toward de-Christianizing. It has a long history in the West, and we're living, in the most recent incarnation of this idea. And it's not a good one. It's a destructive one. It's nihilistic, and I talk about that in my book, The Age of Nihilism. Um, but yeah, the hard left has been behaving awfully similar throughout the years. They're pretty predictable. The hard left. If you want to understand the hard left, go back and read the history of the French Revolution. You'll find everything right there in history. All of our answers to all of the questions that we have are in history somewhere, and we just have to look for them. Yeah.
I'm gonna, uh, I guess, transition and then wrap up with one
Hmm.
final question. You've only
Sure,
been
you bet.
running for a month, so this might
Yep.
be difficult for you to answer, but your writing, like, what are the top
Hmm.
three issues, or I don't know, at least one issue that most is top of mind with your voters?
Yeah, from what I've been hearing, and I've heard from several people via email, And from my sense is that the number one issue is immigration is a big one, and I share that concern. I've lived overseas for a number of years in my life, so I've been on the other side of immigration policy, and so I can appreciate both sides as were, but immigration is a primary concern here in Saskatoon West. Definitely.
My top three issues, immigration's rooted in them, and I'll explain it. But the top three issues are economy, so inflation,
Sure.
regulation, and taxation.
Hmm.
The second one is the lack of access to healthcare, and the third one is the insanity in the schools, public
Yeah.
schools.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I wouldn't disagree with that. Those are all absolutely vital and important issues right now. But from what I've heard from constituents, yeah, out here, immigration is a big one, and I can understand why. But yeah, it's a big one out here. Yeah.
So I said immigration is baked into those. I've taught of all the people I've reached out to some of the immigrants in my community, and they're pretty much all aligned against immigration. So with healthcare, they
Yeah.
tell me privately, they're like, "Payman, these immigrants, they're coming in and they're stealing, free services. They're stealing our healthcare.
Yeah.
With that, with education, they're saying like, my son's got 95% average. He can't get into post secondary education because they prefer to have international students."
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it's all over the place.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree, and that, like I said, I've lived overseas for a number of years, and I've been on the other side of this issue. I've been a foreigner for a number of years in other countries, and when I see, not maybe a digression here, but when I look at what's happening, and particularly back east, with the pro Hamas um, riots in the streets, that sends me. That should not be happening on Canadian streets, right? And as I've been a guest in other countries, and I couldn't even dream of say going out of the streets of a foreign country and sort of fobbing off my political beliefs in public. I couldn't imagine doing that. And yet in Canada, that happens all the time, especially with those pro Hamas demonstrations back east in Montreal and Toronto and Ottawa. I look at that and I just shake I want to bang my head on the table. That should not be happening in my country, but it happens in countries with no sense of who they are or what they stand for or what their values are. And so, and that's tied in with the immigration issue. So to me, that's a big issue. That's a big issue. That should not be happening in my country. We should not be allowing that in my country.
You brought up a good point. A lot of Canadians have not worked and lived abroad,
Mm.
so they don't understand that when you're on probation, like when
Yeah,
you're
right.
you're in a foreign
Yes.
country,
Yes.
uh, when you have a visa and your
Yeah.
visa expires, they don't give a damn if you're a white guy. They will throw you in jail.
Yes. 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 Exactly so. Exactly so. And when, and people, everybody's, all the progressive liberals, they're wringing their hands over whether or not we should deport someone. If they're in violation of immigration law, yes. I mean, whatever country I lived in South Korea, China, and Thailand, well, for six years, but I did not mess around with their immigration system. If I was required to be at immigration to get my work visa stamped, I was there. I got it stamped. I stayed within the confines of the law, and so I don't understand why it's so hard, why it's so difficult to enforce our own immigration policy in this country. I I don't get it. Why is it so difficult to enforce our own laws when every other country in the planet does so? And I never ran afoul of immigration. That's an easy way to get thrown in jail or deported out of the country. So we have our, we got our head up our proverbial butts on this one, and it just doesn't make sense to me. It makes no sense to me at all.
So we
Yeah.
have one final question from the audience. How do
Sure.
we reintroduce Christian values in a secular society
Mm.
without getting preachy?
Yeah. Um, yeah, no, and again, we in the West have a long tradition of separation of church and state, and far be it from me to impose any sort of religious values on somebody that doesn't want them. But I think I'll borrow an idea here from Alexander Solzhenitsyn, and he was saying it in reference to how do we resist heavy-handed governments with um, with an ideological bent. And he was saying, he said, and I'm paraphrasing here, but it is within each one of us to resist the tyranny of government, right? It's down to each individual to resist if they choose to resist. And so to the question, it's down to each of us to embody. It's very platonic in a way. It's down to each of us to embody whatever morality we want. So if it's Christian morality, then it is down to each of us individually on our own to embody those values, and not just embody them, but put them into personal practice each day. Right? It all comes back to the individual, right? If change starts at home, I'm sure we've heard that phrase before, right? So if I want the world to look better, I'll start with myself, which is a very platonic thing to say. If I want the world to look, if I want to change the world for the better, I'll start with myself, right? And slowly it'll spread out outwards from there. And it's all down to the individual, um, I would say. But I have no interest in saying, okay, this is our culture, and this is what you will do. No, 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 none of that. It all starts with the individual, right? And hopefully that has a ripple effect.
There you go, Dave.
Yeah.
Rob Padley, if you want to know if there's a candidate in your riding, if you go to the peoplesparty.ca website, under the candidates link, you can search for, just type in George and, Prince George. If there's someone there, it'll come up.
Hmm.
That's what Dave said too. You can search the PPC site. Okay. So, Curtis, why
Mm.
don't you, how can people get a hold of you?
Um, I have a website, curtismcmanus.ca, and I have email link on the website. But if you're wanting to drop a line through email, Age of Nihilism. Let's see if I can see it here. Ah, there we go. Okay, Age of Nihilism. That's the title of my third book. There we go. So Age of Nihilism at gmail.com. But you can go to my website, www.curtismcmanus.ca, and there's an email link there, or the PPC website. You can get in touch with me through the email links that are on the PPC website as well. Excuse me.
All
I
right.
hope.
And are
Yeah.
you on any social media yet
Oh
or
yeah,
not?
yeah, yeah. Social media. I'm on Twitter, and I can't remember my Twitter handle at Curtis R McManus. I think it's just as simple. at Curtis R. McManus on Twitter. Yep. So you can find me on Twitter. Just search Curtis McManus and it'll show up. Yep.
And if they want to donate, do they go to the
Yeah,
website?
donation through the PPC. It has links on the PPC website. Yeah, so they can find out that way. Yeah.
Well, Curtis, it looks like there's going to be an election called this Sunday. So best of luck to you. We're
All
off
right.
to the
Thanks.
races.
You too, Payman. And thanks for reaching out and getting in touch with me. And I know I have some rough edges where interviewing is concerned, but thanks for getting in touch with me. I appreciate it, Payman.
No, you did better than I do on my interviews. So hats off to you.
All right. I appreciate that. Thanks again.
All right. Take
Okay.
care. Goodbye, everyone in the audience.
Okay.
Thanks for watching.
Okay. Bye-bye.